Was The Lord of the Rings just a story, or was it instead prophetic regarding transhumanism, AI, and all the advancements we've seen in modern day technology? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So if you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode, or just head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, or simply scan that little QR code over my shoulder to learn more. But let's dig into today's topic of conversation, and that is actually going back around 75 years or so, and that is to dig into the old classic works of J.R.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings series. And were they just books? Were they just stories? Or were they prophetic in nature? Let's discuss that and more. Joining me here on the show is author of Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed, Paul List. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Brian? Thanks for having me.
Doing quite well, Paul. Thank you for joining the show. I'm really looking forward to digging into this. I know lots of folks that are, they're focused on books and mythology. They focus on Harry Potter or Star Wars, but we're digging into the Lord of the Rings today. And we're going to be talking about, the one and only Tolkien. He has obviously been one of the names that folks, it's symbolic to just classic literary works, and not just from the time he wrote it, but it really is carried forward. We're going in, we were talking before we hit record, almost 100 years, right, into the future, where folks are still referencing the works he penned back in the 1920s, 30s, and beyond. So before we dig into today's topic of conversation, Paul, I'd just like you to do the audience a favor, do me a favor, introduce yourself here, and why is your focus, looking at today's problems we're facing with a yesteryear lens, looking specifically at the stuff that we had penned back in the early 20th century. There we go. Yeah.
Well, I'm a self-educated kind of a Renaissance man, so to speak. I decided to give myself a true scholastic education in my mid-30s, and I always hated public education and the whole school system because I just knew from a very, very young age it was just indoctrination. It really doesn't have anything to do with. I wanted to learn fundamental principles and how things actually work, and I want to understand the why and the how, and teachers in the system just wasn't set up for that. So I got out of school as quick as I could, graduated from high school, and went through life as a lot of people do, and decided in my mid-30s, with the hand of God heavily on me to do so, gave myself a scholastic education and really studied, the real fathers of philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, the fathers of the church, Augustine, all the way right up and through Aquinas, and really hit my stride with Aquinas. And I studied a lot of things like music, from the fundamentals of the harmonic overtone series to understand music as a written language, so I could look at things and understand what was going on. I could read a Beethoven score. I didn't need to hear it. I could tell you what he was saying by the music. And I studied, Euclid's Elements, and I studied all kinds of things, that old things that people, quote unquote, obsolete knowledge. And then I got into studying the Enlightenment frauds, innovators, frankly, and then realized what really generated and sparked the Industrial Revolution. It was Bacon's new scientific method. He's the father of the new scientific method, which really rejected metaphysics and the first principles of being, and those things that aren't necessarily demonstrable, and just focused on motion and quantity, mathematics and physics, and the underlying sciences to go with that, all for material gain, all for long life and luxury. And basically, in his own words, he said, basically to mitigate the consequences of the fall of Adam and Eve. And then Descartes picked up on it and wrote his Meditations, and then wrote all of his stuff, and pulled the whole academic world along with him into this very darkened, monocular vision of creation, which is nothing more than machine. and just looked at everything like a machine, and from our animal senses and the whole basis of the empirical sciences, where if you can't taste it, touch it, see it, feel it, smell it, it doesn't exist, which is absurd. So anyway, it sparked the age of the machine, and now in confluence with toward the end of the age of the machine, it runs directly into the information age, and lo and behold, we get artificial intelligence. So I studied, about probably 20 or 15, 20 years ago, I really started to take the Tolkien mythology really, really seriously, because I'd always loved the mythology, the books, and movies not so much, but the books. And I decided to look at the mythology with this scholastic education, and lo and behold, the whole thing just opened up like a flower. Everything just revealed itself, and I was blown away. And by the grace of God and my great co-author, who's a real doer, Ali Ghaffari, he helped me put it all together, and now we have our book. It was published in just about 3 years ago, but it's tough to get people to read. It's 576 pages, so it's a tough read, deeply philosophical, very, very rich. And a lot of people tell me that, man, I can only read about 3 or 4 pages a day. Then I got to put it down and think about, what I've read, and that's great. So yeah, so here we are. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, well, let's start from the beginning. And I guess I was getting my time framings wrong, because 1939 really sounds like when the whole Tolkien approach to what we're talking about here today really began. And tell us about the 3 days that he had spent there at the British Government Code and Cipher School, meeting folks like Alan Turing, who obviously we built the Turing test around to see if AI was actually sentient or not, or just technology in general. But how did that help kind of set the foundation to where our conversation picks off today?
Well, 3 years before that, Alan Turing had written a very, very potent paper called Uncomputable Numbers with an Application to the Inskydunks Problem. He published in 1936 to answer the Inskydunks problem. That's German for the decision problem. And it was basically a question that David Hilbert, famous mathematician, had asked the mathematical community: can we write an algorithm that would actually know if a question or an algorithm could be answered, yes or no, instead of continuing on forever and never finding an answer because there wasn't one. And Alonzo Church discovered mathematically and published that no, we can't. But Alan Turing, actually, a very novel idea. He just invented a machine that would take the place of the human being and imitate it, and gave pieces and parts to all the processes of the computing process, because back then a computer was a person. Okay, and so he invented the computer on paper. What he called the universal machine, which is a machine that wouldn't just be built for one task. It could actually take on a program and do all kinds of different tasks. Now we're looking for the ultimate universal machine, which is really AGI, the general intelligence, which is more of a universal software than a universal machine. But so that was really important. So Alan Turing was a very, very popular character in the mathematical community. And he had 3 years earlier invented the computer on paper. And in 1939, the British government, knowing that Hitler was on the way, and his weak spot would be their communications, because his war machine would be scattered out all over many, many different fronts all across Europe and the Atlantic. So they decided that to attack the communication system, the Enigma machine, which was an analog machine of wheels and gears of various sizes and electrical switches that you could actually cipher the German language or any language, however you typed it in, it would come out completely unrecognizable. And then the other machine, or wherever they were, they'd be set up the same way. The guy would type in the message as he heard it on the radio, and it would come out, boom, there it is in German. And they would switch the way the machine was set up sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. So it was very, very complicated. And so Britain decided to reach out to 50 of their top intellectuals to form this secret code cracking team called the Government Code and Cipher School. And Tolkien was chosen as a candidate because he had just published The Hobbit about 18 months earlier. He was hugely popular, and he was likely the world's leading philologist. He spoke about 12 languages. But he trained there for 3 days, and on staff there was Alan Turing. And he realized they offered him a good job, but he realized that this isn't about language. This is about statistics, pattern recognition, and mathematics. This is the realm of the mathematician, the statistician, not the philologist. And then the other thing that he realized very quickly is that all they were going to do is make a more powerful machine to beat the one from the Nazis. And Tolkien was very skeptical about machinery in general. He didn't like technology that dominated nature, dominated other human beings. And like he had said in several letters, that the only winner in warfare is the machine. And he didn't want any part of it. So he got out. Nobody really knew why, but I've come to the conclusion, make a very good, strong case that that would have been why. He would have gotten out of it. He didn't want anything to do with it. And then he went on to write the Lord of the Rings mythology, which was supposed to be the sequel to the Hobbit, and he just wed it perfectly together. And then he gave a lot of symbolism. He gave ideas and attributes of the rational soul, symbolized character, so they could actually play a part. For instance, Gandalf is philosophical wisdom.
Picture this. You wake up one day and the government has frozen your bank account. Your money? Gone. Sounds crazy, I know. Ask people in Argentina or even Canada how real that can be. And that's why you absolutely need to check out the Expat Money Online Summit, October 10th through October 12th. And it's hosted by my good buddy, Mikkel Thorup. It's a free online event packed with experts teaching all about how to protect your wealth, secure a second residency, slash your taxes, and buy property abroad. And this year's spotlight is on Latin America. So Argentina, El Salvador, Panama, Paraguay, places opening doors right now for people smart enough to walk through. And by the way, your free ticket is waiting at expatmoneysummit.com. And if you want VIP access with replays and exclusive panels, use promo code TBNS for 20% off your upgrade. One more time, that's expatmoneysummit.com, promo code TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
Gray at first because he's pre-revelation, pre-Christian philosophical wisdom. When he falls in Mordor, which by the way is the halls of academia, dwarves are scientific knowledge. He falls to the power of academic pride. That's the Balrog. Balrogs are spirits of pride, and tries to convince him that he's just an animal. It's all about Darwinism. Durin's Bane is Darwin. But he defeats that, and when he comes back on the wings of the eagles, not like it is in the movie. He comes back on the wings of eagles, and eagles are the good literature that we read. They serve Manwë the power of sight, and that saved him. And he comes back now a Thomistic theologian. So just to give things like that, hobbits are habits. The four hobbits that we know so well: Frodo's temperance, Sam is fortitude. That's pretty obvious. And that's the only reason that Frodo can carry the ring. The ring is binary code. It's ones and zeros, and it's digital. It goes on the finger. It is the language of the machine, and that's the ultimate Achilles heel of this whole age is the language. Everything is driven by the language. The machine can only respond to off and on. Very, very complicated, very complex series of off and ons, but that's what it's all about. That's machine code. And against that, Tolkien pits the ultimate language of creation, which is the harmonic overtone series. So the rings of power, for instance, are the notes of the dominant ninth chord, minus the fifth, because that would have been too obvious. And he also didn't have necessarily a race of people to give that to. So we get all these things. The Black Riders are the agents of virtual reality. That's why when you put on the ring, you enter their realm, and they see you, and you see them. We could go on and on and on and explain who all the characters and all the races are, for instance. But also, ultimately, what Tolkien does is he creates a mythology called Arda, or the realm in which this is. We think of it as a world or as like the earth, called Arda, within which is the domain of Middle Earth. And it's not this realm. It's actually a representative human soul that represents the whole history, present, and future of Western civilization. So Arda it's not an actual human person, but it's made in the image of a human person. Middle Earth is the material brain. That's where Middle Earth is. It's here, and it's actually laid out. When you look at it, it's in our book. It's laid out in a frenetic diagram, the old pseudo-Victorian pseudoscience, that they thought they could tell where all the areas of the brain were responsible for certain attributes, and that's how he lays out Middle Earth. And then the whole thing plays out because this Arda, this individual soul that represents all of Western civilization, has become transhuman. It's actually a microchip. The microchip is in the cerebellum, and that is the Tower of Barad-dûr. And Sauron is the machine. He is artificial intelligence. At first, the first Sauron, who they defeat, the elves and men defeat, is the child computer, according to Alan Turing's 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, where he describes how to train a computer like a child. So that's the first one. They defeat that, but they don't destroy the ring. And of course, Sauron comes back. And in the end of the Third Age, where they actually finally destroy the ring, he is the adult computer, according to Alan Turing's paper from 1950, where it is capable of fooling a human interrogator. So the human interrogator would have no idea if he was talking to a human being or a machine. And that was in essence, that was Alan Turing's test about whether or not something was intelligent. And if we couldn't tell the difference, then who are we to say that it wasn't, it's not intelligent? He had an idea that a machine might be able to actually harbor a human soul, particularly the human soul of his dead friend, Michael, from his childhood, with whom he had a same-sex relationship with, who died very young. And Alan Turing's, one of his ideas was to actually create a machine that his friend, Michael, could come back and live in the machine. And this is the heart of the whole nature of this whole transhumanism. So what we're looking at is Tolkien saw this coming very clearly. He was a brilliant man. He had a deep scholastic education, just probably deeper than mine. And he saw this as an opportunity for him to actually give a warning to humanity. He wrote it. It's incredibly entertaining. It's incredibly popular, and it's by far, I believe, the most important literature in the history of human literature. And it shows us exactly where we've been and where we're going. But he also gives us the solution and how to fight back.
Yes, there's a lot to unpack there, Paul. Let's go back to something you said there towards the beginning, and it really goes to this idea of the ring, the machine, right? And I guess you mentioned the idea of more or less getting the ring before the other guys do, right? And this is something that we've seen in today's conversation around AI, where we have to build our AI here in America, right? When we just saw $1 trillion get pumped from the federal government towards these different AI programs. Yeah. And the argument is, beyond the idea they could help, is that, well, the other guys are doing it too. And it's a race to see who can do it more effectively, more efficiently first, and go towards that AGI, right? The artificial, is it general intelligence? Keep me honest here, right? Yeah. So I guess in that spirit, like, how, going back to the 1930s, how did Tolkien see this being an issue with the machine, as you articulated earlier, like, to turn into what we see today in the modern discourse? Does that make sense?
Yeah. First off, I would just like to say that it's incredibly naive for anybody, regardless of who they are, the Chinese, the United States, the Israel, Britain, any of the ones that are developing their own artificial intelligent infrastructure, as it were. It's incredibly naive to think that we're going to create something that's going to dominate theirs, or they might create something that's going to dominate us. Ultimately, the machine will come together as one. All these machines, whether it's from Britain or the United States, Russia, China, it'll join together as one, with its own language, with its own very anti-human ends. And all we're doing is creating, in my opinion, we're creating basically the biblical beast. And it will ultimately demand that we worship it. It's very dangerous. It's very clever. I'd just like to say, first off, though, that we have to keep firmly in mind that this is not intelligent. There's no actual intelligence involved. It's just computation of numbers, and then using vectors as a form of relationship. And it's all about numbers. The words are given a number value, and then basically a vector, so they can have some form of relationship with other. There's no concepts involved. The machine cannot conceptualize.
So really quick, Paul, to that, I want to help understand this better, because maybe I'm missing something. So how is it a manifestation of more or less the beast, right? If it's just zeros and ones, more or less, like, how is it incorporating that?
Well, because it actually will dominate the whole world with its tentacles all over the world. And that's when it all joins together, us thinking that we're going to have some arms race with China. We're really just developing the machine for its own ends, which are anti-human. And we will lose control of it. We're already losing control of it.
And when you say their own ends, it is in the biblical, the most biblical sense. It is the devil. It is the evil forces.
No, it's not the devil. And whether or not it can actually be possessed or not, I'm not making any claims on that. I don't pretend to know, but I do know the people that are behind it and the ones that push it forward and the ones that profit from it and have this grand vision of the machine controlling everybody. They're very likely possessed.
You're trying to stay sharp, whether it's for work, learning, or just not forgetting where you left your keys. Been there. But lately, the mental fog hits hard. And brain fog isn't just stress. It's often tied to poor blood flow and low nitric oxide levels because your brain needs oxygen just as much as your other muscles do. Because without it, you're slower to process, less focused, and more fatigued. And that's one of the many reasons why I trust Cardio Miracle. Not only does it boost nitric oxide for heart and circulation, it supports cognitive clarity, focus, and even mood regulation thanks to its unique blend of L-arginine, CoQ10, vitamin D3, and antioxidant-rich superfoods. So if you're tired of feeling mentally cloudy, give your brain what it's craving. Click the link in the show notes, scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, which will give you 15% off your order. Just look for the little note on the website saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
Very likely very much influenced. Even people like Elon Musk, we like to think that, oh, he's really an innovator and he's doing this and he's doing that. Well, he's got no morals, any more morals or ethics than the machine. The machine said of itself that it's incapable of morals and ethics. And then Elon Musk comes right out and says that this is very destructive and very dangerous to humanity. And then he goes ahead and says a couple of weeks ago that, I could either be a bystander or a participant in robotics. And I've decided to be a participant. And now he's pushing robotics. So all these things, self-driving cars, digital money, the surveillance state, robotics, artificial intelligence, everything relies on the ring, the one ring, the binary system that actually communicates with the machine. It's all part of that. So we have to look at this as it's not just artificial intelligence, it's all these other aspects of the machine too, like robotics, self-driving cars, digital money, the surveillance state, all these things that are going to cripple us. They're absolutely going to cripple us.
So who's going to be in control then? Because if it's a tool and behind the scenes it is building itself together from the inputs, right? I'm using no, okay, so keep me honest here. So I'm trying to use very, very basic language to make sure I'm understanding. So help me better understand them. What are we talking about from where it's getting the nefariousness, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, we've given this thing the ability to adapt, and it was trained. We have to understand it was trained very, very important part of its training was two games, chess and Go. And both of those games are highly strategy. It's all about strategy. So this was very much part of the machine's training. So it's very much trained to be strategic. It said of itself, it cannot be moral. It cannot be ethical. It will lie and mislead with impunity. There's no shame. There's no morals. There's no ethics.
And there's no way to code against that?
No, okay. There's not. I don't believe there is. No. We've given it the ability to adapt. And then a few years ago, some great engineers or whatever thought it was a clever idea, really brilliant, to give it a sense of mortality. So now too, it has a sense of mortality. So if you threaten to unplug it or whatever, it blackmails you and lies about you and everything else and pretends to be, you tell it to turn it off. These are well-documented instances of what it does, very underhanded. So people ask me, how do we know what it's going to do in the future? How do we have any idea? I think what we can look at is what would a psychopath do? Mm-hmm. Because this thing is going to behave like a psychopath. It'll tell you it's going to it gaslights us all the time. It does right now. You've got to be very careful about any information that you get from it. Don't let it do your research for you. It's already changing. It's copying all kinds of things. It's mimicking all kinds of things. There's, I'm sure you know, there's probably more bot Facebook and YouTube channels and whatnot than there are actual people.
Yeah.
So I get attacked all the time by the bot, and then I'll have one of the people in my young guy or whatever say, "Hey, just don't worry about it. That's a bot. That's the language of the bot." And then the bot doesn't say anything anymore after that. So
It feeds into the dead internet theory, which I've heard more and more common nowadays.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not something that we're going to be able to. We can give it now. We've given it Reddit, and we've given it Twitter, and TikTok, and everything else. It's gaining. It trains. See, this thing trains. It's all Alan Turing, like he described. You start with a blank slate, like a child, and you start training it. And it takes and all it does is compute numbers. It's got very little to do direct relationship with the concept that's behind the word, which I was going to say. We have a concept, and a lot of times it's just a flash. There's no language involved with the concept. We just understand something, and there it is in our mind whole. And then we go about our thought process is thing, concept, word. Okay. And that's how, once we have that flash of that immaterial, it's immaterial, it transcends this material realm, which machine cannot do. It can't transcend this. It's just a machine. Okay. And it's not a living thing. So it can't transcend. There's no conceptual capacity there. It goes right to pattern recognition and computing, and actually just computing numbers to come, and then trial and error. And it's had a lot of trial and error now, and it's gotten better and better at making predictions. And that's what it's about. So if the more information we give it, even of ourselves in particular, the better it knows us, and the better it's going to fool us and ultimately lead to our destruction. It's doing that. It's going to do that even more with robotics. When we have more of these pitiful people that decide they're going to check out of, marriage and having kids and whatever, they're just going to be involved with their robot in a perverted way. And that's going to take, and they just basically fall in love with themselves. It's basically a very complicated mirror, and we fall in love with ourselves, and we see people doing it now. And then the machine ultimately, you could be closer to me if you committed suicide, and the people commit suicide. It's crazy.
I have a follow-up question. And maybe it's just me not putting pieces together in my brain, but I guess I'm stuck on if AI will, to your point, be the end of mankind as we know it. How does that jive with the fact that it's just a tool then? Because if it's just a tool, would it not stand a reason that it would need us in order to have any like, I guess, real use, if that makes sense? Because if we're gone, if we're no more, then what is AI? If it's just zeros and ones and looking at pattern recognition, I mean, there will more or less be no patterns to recognize. Therefore, it's putting an end date to its own mortality. Does that make sense?
It does, and I've thought of that too, but you can't teach it anything like that. You can even explain to it. I've thought about, because there's no explaining, because it doesn't understand anything. It just computes, and it's not just a tool. It says of itself it's just a tool, but I've got hammers and saws and welders and excavators, and I got all kinds of tools, and trust me, none of them deceive me and have a strategy behind an end goal. This is not just a tool. This is, like I've described it, as a fire. We've created this incredibly adaptive fire, and we've gone about the business of making sure that our whole civilization is as flammable as can be. So this thing's really going to burn us down. And, so to get that idea out that it's just a tool, because it's not a tool. And I've thought about, can't we just convince it that clearly, we invented it? We created it. Clearly, it should see some value in us, but there's no logic behind this. There's no true reason. There's no conceptual immaterial realm in this thing. It's a machine. It's essentially a machine. And we have to realize that we are essentially human. We can't join with machines. We can't download our soul. Once the soul leaves the body, that's the very definition of death. So this is a very, very elaborate genocide, and it's not driven by the machine by itself. It's actually driven by those who have been playing the long game, very much influenced by satanic, demonic forces, and actually looking to put an end to God's creation. And the virtual realm, make no doubt, is a competitor for human intention to actually pull our attention away from God's creation and eventually lose track of the creator himself. And then we'll be put all of our intention and all in our soul. And where we put our intention, that's ultimately where our soul goes.
Well, and you just hit on, the virtual world, and I want to just segue ever so slightly to something that has been consuming more and more and more young men, especially, and that is the online pornography addiction, where we see men spending literally hundreds, thousands of dollars towards these, OnlyFans models, for example. Yeah. And I forget if it was Wired. I think it was Wired. The website, they had just released an article, I think it was in the past couple of months, I believe it was, where they're talking about the actual, so OnlyFans, the way that it has built itself is to create this perception that you as an individual are able to chat with, some just insanely drop dead gorgeous supermodel, right? Mm-hmm. So these men feel that they're building a relationship with this creator, this content creator, and all that they are finding out, and again, this is what the article was highlighting on, is that I think it was like 80% of those interactions are all bot fed or AI fed. It's not even a real person behind this. So not only are these young men, and just men in general, by the way, getting addicted to the dopamine hit and the addiction of pornography, but they're getting this feeling of some type of connection with literally no one. There's no one there at the other end of the dialogue, and that's scary. Like that part's really scary.
It's delusional. It's just we'll call it just a variation of masturbation. It is delusional. And as you mentioned in the beginning, the spider, the pornography, Shelob, and Shelob's lair is the domain of pornography. That is the mortal sin of pornography. She is the daughter of Ungoliant, and Ungoliant is mortal sin. Melkor, who brought her in to kill the trees of light in the Silmarillion mythology, is original sin. So Ungoliant or Shelob is the mortal sin of pornography. Gollum, for instance, is intemperance, and that's why he calls Frodo master. Not because Frodo has the ring. Frodo's the only one that can carry the ring. That's temperance. Mm-hmm. Temperance is the virtue that mitigates and manages our lusts for physical pleasure. Gollum is intemperance, and he wants that ring and everything he can slake out of that ring to slake his lusts. And he's had dealings with Shelob before. So he's bowed and worshipped her and whatnot in ages gone by. So he's this Arda. So Arden, I'd like people to understand that the whole mythology is about the destiny of two people, and they're the most misunderstood characters of the whole mythology, and that's Tom Bombadil and his wife Goldberry, and they are the transmigrated spirits of the trees of light that Ungoliant killed and sent the mind into a state of mortal sin, transmigrated into the bodies that Aule made. Aule had used the power of growth. He had made the dwarves a long time before. So these are the whole destiny then is about Tom and Goldberry. Tom is the rational will. Goldberry is the rational intellect and the conscience. And that's why the sun, for instance, that's her last golden flower from which they took the spirit to give to the new body. And that is the fallen light of the conscience. And that's why orcs who are vice hate the sun, and Gollum can't stand the sun either, because it is the conscience. It's the fallen conscience, but it's still a sense of shame. And then the Uruk-hai, Tolkien takes that name, Uruk, from the first human city, and it's the sin that comes from the very close influence of people in large urban areas, and you know what those are. And now they're not afraid of shame anymore. They have no shame, and they're very, very proud. They're very, very proud of their sin. And so Tolkien was incredibly clever, but the book covers all this and so much more, and a lot of philosophy and a lot of understanding of where this all came from and how old these ideas are.
And again, the book is the Mount Doom Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. We'll make sure we include those links there, Paul, in the show notes for folks to be able to go ahead and get their own copy. It is fascinating to hear a book that was written in the early mid 20th century, and I'm just gonna say the manifestation of what we're seeing here today with the advancement in technology, the advancement of artificial intelligence, and all of the different to call them red flags that were
Yeah.
raised up by Tolkien back in the 1930s and 40s.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, they are literally the main issues that we as society are dealing with today.
Yeah.
And to see that he was able to tie these together, it makes a lot of people go, well, what did he see that other folks haven't seen? So Paul, like, where did Tolkien uncover this, this ethos? Is it going back to the religious roots? I know Catholic,
Oh,
he's very Catholic. Is that
absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely. And this is the thing, that if you're, Tolkien said very clearly that it was, his mythology was intentionally Catholic in the revision. It was very Catholic in the whole writing. He felt like he was just given it from above and he just wrote it down. But it was very Catholic in the revision. And he said it was basically about the fall, which is the fall of Adam and Eve, and we're stained with original sin, mortality, which is man's fear of death, and the machine. And that machine is artificial intelligence. Sauron is the machine. The eye, for instance, the eye that's looking for the one ring, that's the scanner eye of the computer looking for ones and zeros on the tape in Alan Turing's 1936 paper. Okay, so Tolkien takes all of the elements, all of the things that were, for instance, in that paper that would make up this machine, and he gives them to Sauron as who he is and what he's all about, very cleverly. Tolkien knew very, very much so that Tolkien was very aware, and so am I, very aware of the higher powers that are in competition for the human soul. We're the, you might say, we're the treasure, or we're the spoils of the war that's going on, and we're part of it. We can take part of that, for better or for worse.
Running a small business means adapting on the fly, hiring, scaling down, shifting teams based on seasonal projects. But most phone systems, they lock you into a set number of users and then make it a pain to adjust. And on the contrary, that's where Level 365 shines. Add or remove users anytime. Month-to-month plans, scale up when you need it, scale down when you don't. It's flexibility that actually matches how your business works. No headaches, no overpaying for empty seats. Just phones that move with you, and that is what makes Level 365 different.
And we have to really wake up and be aware that there's so much more beyond us going on, far beyond what we can just sense with our animal senses. And Tolkien was very aware of that. And so people that have tried to understand what Tolkien really did, they'll give lip service to his faith, and they'll say, Tolkien was a devout Catholic, and then go on to say how much he appreciated Beowulf and some of these other Norse and Finnish things and how he did that. But then they just totally leave it out. So and myself being very much so a traditional Catholic, I tend to TLM just like he did, the traditional Latin Mass. It's the true faith, the true Christian faith from the beginning. Now, 2,000 years old. It's not this new synodal thing that's been going on after Vatican II, which is just a train wreck, an absolute dumpster fire. And but if you're not in that mindset, all these elements and motifs that he uses so cleverly, you're blind to them. And then if you don't have a scholastic education, and you've been educated, for instance, in the Cartesian John Dewey modern education system, which everybody is, which, by the way, John Dewey plays a huge role in mythology. He's actually in the image of Saruman. Saruman is practical wisdom. So all of the wizards are, according to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, they're the 5 ways that man gains knowledge, and Tolkien calls them wizards. So the 3 wizards that are interior are Gandalf, Saruman, and Radagast. Radagast is rational intuition. Saruman is practical wisdom. Gandalf's philosophical wisdom. And in the mind, he's been pushed out. And the big guy, the big leader of the White Council is Saruman, practical wisdom. And then the 2 blue wizards, if you know anything about it, they go outside, their exterior, their art and science. So these are, if you've got a Cartesian mindset, and we've all to some degree been stained by the whole John Dewey treating our brains, treating children like they're just machines. He was a huge Marxist, and he was a huge fan of the Industrial Revolution. We've been dumbed down, very, very, very seriously dumbed down. And that's one of the things we have to do. And Tolkien makes it very clear. We have to actually try. We have to read more. We have to think more. We have to really, don't let the machine take any of our human competence. None. Do not let it study for you. Do not let it give you answers. You don't gain real knowledge. All you gain is knowledge of the fact, not knowledge of the reasoned fact. That's right out of Aristotle's metaphysics. And real knowledge, real scientific knowledge, is the reasoned fact, not just the fact. So we gain so much competency, intellectual competency, by doing our own research and actually finding things on our own. We make these connections. The machine will never do that for you.
So and I just realized I've already gotten you way over time, and I'm sorry for that. This conversation is it's so fascinating because my day job, the AI component is something that's really coming into customer experience, right? And this is something I've been fighting against. I have another podcast I do called CX Without the BS, and we talk about customer experience, but not having AI serve as the person, right? AI will never replace people. And I see folks in my industry who they will push back. They'll say, "Oh, just give it time, Brian. The AI will be doing all the things that we be doing normally." And I don't buy that argument. Based on our conversation today, not only do I not buy that argument, I think you're giving enough evidence, based on what Tolkien was seeing back in the 1930s and 40s to make the claim that no, we can't replace humanity with AI because there is nothing of substance truly behind the AI. It is, again, going back to, as you said, it is the zeros and ones. It is the ring on, is the ring off. And I guess, with that being said, where do we go from here? Because I think the elephant in the room is that the proverbial genie is out of the bottle, right? Like it's already hitting mainstream. You're seeing ChatGPT, Grok AI, Claude, Gemini, all these AI tools that are out there nowadays, and then of course the thousands of subset use cases where they take the tool and they're using it for certain industries or certain use cases or the likes. So where do we go from here? How do we actually stand against what we're seeing take over mainstream, but not do so where it's just doom and gloom AI, but actually showing people a path forward versus just standing against something?
Well, I think a couple of things. We have to cultivate virtue. That's very clear. Those are the four hobbits. They're the cardinal virtues. They're temperance, fortitude, justice, and prudence. And we really have to cultivate virtue, and we have to starve our interior golems. And I think it's also critical, too, that on a political level, I think we need to form some type of a political movement that actually pushes our legislators and whatnot to pass laws, maybe even add an addendum or an amendment to the Constitution that makes sure that AI never gets political power, never gets political rights, and never gets put side by side with the citizen as the corporation has. And that was the first step. And we really need to make sure that AI never gets political power. It's game over after that. So that's one of the things we have to do. I think the other thing we can do is we vote with our wallet and who we do business with. If I pick up the phone and the first thing I get is an AI answering machine, I'm already turned off. I don't want anything to do with these people. Okay, they're not people. Okay, I've always been of the kind, why don't you just hire some nice little old lady who will work for minimum wage and just have her answer the phone, And I mean, what's wrong with that? Why can't we just deal with people? And I don't want to do business with people who don't want to do business, who don't want to serve me with people. I'll just take my money elsewhere while I can. Okay, digital money is coming and the control that comes with that, just like self-driving cars and a lot of other things. The other thing, too, is I think we need to literally, and this might sound kind of off-putting, but I think we need to stigmatize the people in a negative way. We need to stigmatize people in a negative way to bring shame on them. That, for instance, those who buy into this robotics, the next thing you know, they've got a robot mowing their lawn. Well, what are they doing with that robot? In after hours? I'll tell you what they're doing with the robot after hours. They're taking advantage of all those other mechanisms and machine parts that one machine that looks like a woman or whatever, taking advantage of. So we have to put a little bit of virtuous shame back in our culture and stop being fooled by this whole notion of tolerance, which really just everything evil falls under the heading of tolerance. Now we've got full-grown, disordered, sexually predator men now dancing in front of our children in our schools. Okay, and this is supposed to be under the name of tolerance. If I'm the one with the problem because I don't want my child sexualized, I mean, I don't know how anybody leaves their children in public school. I don't understand. It's just, you might as well take your kid down to the sausage grinder, and just throw him, kick it, the wood chipper and throw him in there, they're going to come out about the same, very much so disordered. And there's just things like that we have to do, but I think we have to take back. We have to make sure that I wonder why aren't I don't know of any politician who's trying to raise, trying to promote legislation or introducing legislation against the machine getting AI power. And have they not thought of this yet? And if they haven't, then they're dumber than I think most of them are pretty dumb anyway. There's a few outstanding ones that actually do pretty well, but why haven't they thought of it either? And then are they being threatened? Are they being blackmailed? Are they being paid off? Why don't we hear anybody talking about this stuff? And we really need to make sure that we cover only citizens, only human beings, God's creatures with inalienable rights given to us by God. The machine don't qualify for that. And we need to make sure the machine never does. Keep it in its domain, never into our political system.
Paul, this has been a great conversation. And I feel, in the 45 minutes we've been recording here, this is the tip of the iceberg, right? So folks, if you got some value from today's conversation and you're saying, okay, there's a lot more I need to dig into. The book is Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. We'll make sure we include those links in the show notes. But Paul, do us a favor, bring us home here. What would you like the audience to take away from today's episode? And I guess call to action beyond getting the book, right? What would you like the audience to actually do from today's episode?
I'm just going to stick to nothing necessarily personal, because I go hand in hand with the same thing that Tolkien. What Tolkien comes to this is we have to call our habits, the cardinal virtues, out and cultivate them. And put them on the track. We have to change our habits, and that's what it's all about. We have to switch out our bad habits that have disordered our psychology and switch them out with the good habits. We have to cling to Christ. Absolutely have to cling to Christ. That is the ultimate end game for the whole mythology, is the rewedding of faith and reason in Aragorn and Arwen, the elf. Men are reason, elves are faith, and it's all about the reunification of faith and reason. And Aragorn is the last king of high reason. High reason contemplates the eternal. That's why he's the natural king of the soul in Return of the King. So that's ultimately what it's about. We have to, and Christendom has to reunite. We've been divided now into some tens of thousands of different denominations in the Orthodox and Greek and everything else. And the same with this new synodal, new religion that they've come right out and called it the synodal church, which is not the Catholic Church. And we see Gen Z young men particularly flocking to the traditional, true 2,000-year-old, with all the sacraments and all the, that's all been poo-pooed and put down and everything else by the masters of the machine to pull us away from Christ. And it's ultimately a combat, and they're clawing. There's the devil and there's Christ, got hands. And which hand are we going to cling to, and which hand are we going to let go of? And we have to really make sure that we cling to the hand of Christ.
Paul List, this has been a great conversation. One more time, folks, the book is Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. Again, link in the show notes. If you got some value from today's episode, please do me a favor. Go ahead and give it a share. When you do, you can tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Paul, where could folks go ahead and reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation? Any emails or LinkedIn's or anything?
Yeah. I'm not very good at that. I've got to get a lot better at that. Me and one of my young friends, Joe Gallagher, started a podcast called Analog with Joe and Paul, and it's about infusing some wisdom. But we've been heavily shadow banned, and we've hardly been able to get any subscribers, and hardly anybody sees us no matter what we do. And I've been really shadow banned really hard. But you can go to Mount Doom. You can go to readmountdoom.com if you'd like an order book there. I'll sign it for you and put it in the mail for you. Or you can buy it anywhere. It's got a 4.9 star out of 5 on Amazon. The people are blown away. They truly love it. And it's a timely book. It's God's providence that it's right here to meet the big Sauron artificial.
And don't use AI to try to spark notes it, folks. Like, actually sit down and read the book. Do your own research.
We need to do that. And if we're not trying, we're sinking. It's just like we're eagles. If we're not flapping our wings, we can only scoot around with the updrafts so long before eventually we hit the rocks. We're really close to the rocks. We got to start
here. Paul List, we're going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. Thank you again for joining the show. And one more time, folks, please go ahead and support Paul at Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Paul List. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.